Natalie walked into the coffee shop with a decision that terrified her, bringing Sophie the 4-year-old daughter she had always hidden from her dates. She knew what would happen. The judgmental looks, the awkward silence, the moment when yet another man would stand up and walk away. But the man waiting for her today was Maddox, a black single father whose eyes held no familiar contempt, only something she couldn't quite name. Within minutes, his reaction shattered every assumption she had believed to be true. But could that unexpected compassion survive the secret she was still hiding? 2 hours before walking into that coffee shop, Natalie stood in front of her bathroom mirror, applying mascara with trembling hands. Behind her, Sophie sat on the worn carpet of their small apartment, arranging plastic animals into a circle she called a family meeting. The phone buzzed. Natalie grabbed it already, knowing what the message would say before she read it. "So sorry, can't make it today. Something came up. The babysitter. The third one to cancel on her this month." Natalie stared at the screen, her chest tightening. This was supposed to be her chance. Her first real date in over a year, set up by a coworker who promised that this man was different. But now she faced the same impossible choice she always faced: cancel and become the flaky single mom who could never follow through or show up alone, and watch another man's eyes change the moment he learned she had a child. She had seen that look too many times. The subtle shift from interest to calculation, the way they would suddenly remember somewhere else they needed to be. One man had actually excused himself to use the restroom and never came back, leaving her with the check and a hollow feeling in her stomach. Sophie looked up from her animals. "Mommy, are you going somewhere pretty?" Natalie knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. Sophie had her sister's eyes, deep brown, curious, always searching. Every time Natalie looked into them, she saw Rachel, her older sister who had fought so hard to stay alive for this little girl, who had held Natalie's hand in that hospital room and made her promise. Be her mother, Natalie, not her aunt, not her guardian, her mother. Don't let her grow up feeling like she's missing something. And when you find someone who loves you both, let him in. You deserve a real family too. Natalie had kept that promise for 2 years now. She had become Sophie's mother in every way that mattered, even if the law called her something else. Even if she had never told anyone the truth about where Sophie came from. She made her decision in that moment. If this man couldn't accept her with a child, then he wasn't worth her time anyway. Better to know now than to waste months pretending to be someone she wasn't. "How would you like to come with Mommy today?" Natalie asked, forcing a smile. "We're going to meet someone new." Sophie's face lit up. "Can I bring my bunny?" "Of course you can." Across town, Maddox sat in his car outside the coffee shop, staring at a photo on his phone. His wife, Sarah, smiled back at him, holding a newborn Jaden in her arms. That picture was 6 years old now. Sarah had been gone for 3 of them. He still remembered the phone call, the police officer's voice clinical and detached, a drunk driver running a red light. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. What the officer didn't tell him, what Maddox only discovered weeks later, sorting through Sarah's belongings, was that she had been keeping a secret. Medical papers hidden in her desk drawer. A diagnosis she had never shared. Early-stage lymphoma treatable with chemotherapy. She had been scheduled to start treatment the week after the accident. She had never told him she was sick. She had carried that burden alone, and now Maddox would never know why. Since then, he had raised Jaden alone. He had learned to braid hair for school picture day, to make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs to sit through parent-teacher conferences where he was often the only father in the room. He had also learned what it meant to be a black man alone with a child in public spaces. The suspicious glances at playgrounds, the security guards who followed him through stores, the women who clutched their purses tighter when he walked past. Dating had been a disaster. Some women treated him like a charity case, eager to save the poor widower. Others saw him as an exotic experience, curious about what it would be like to date a black man, but never serious about anything real. Most simply disappeared the moment they realized Jaden came as part of the package. His phone rang. His mother's name flashed on the screen. "Are you there yet?" Eleanor's voice was warm but persistent. "I'm in the parking lot." "Good. Don't run away this time." Maddox almost smiled. "I didn't run away last time. I just realized she wasn't right." "Maddox Anthony Williams, you left before the appetizers arrived." She asked if Jaden's hair was natural and if she could touch it. Eleanor sighed. Okay, that one deserved to be left. But this woman is different. My friend says she's kind, and she understands what it's like to struggle. What does that mean? It means give her a chance. Jaden needs more than just you, baby. He needs a family. Maddox ended the call and stepped out of the car. The afternoon sun was warm on his face, and he took a deep breath before walking toward the coffee shop. One more disappointment wouldn't kill him. He had survived worse. He chose a table near the window and ordered a black coffee, checking his phone every few minutes. The dating app photo showed a woman with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. Natalie, 28 years old, worked at a nonprofit. No other details. When the door opened, Maddox looked up and felt his breath catch. It was her, the woman from the photo. But she wasn't alone. A little girl clung to her hand, clutching a stuffed bunny against her chest. Natalie's eyes found his, and he watched the fear wash over her face. She was bracing herself, he realized, waiting for him to stand up and leave like all the others probably had. For a moment, Maddox just looked at her, at the way her shoulders curved inward, protective, at the little girl half hidden behind her legs, at the desperate hope battling with resignation in her expression. He thought of Jaden, of all the times he had walked into a room and felt people's expectations pressing down on him, of what it meant to be judged before you even opened your mouth. Maddox stood up. Natalie flinched, and her grip on the little girl's hand tightened. But instead of leaving, he pulled out 2 chairs. "You must be Natalie," he said, keeping his voice gentle. Then he crouched down to eye level with the child. "And who's this?" The little girl pressed closer to Natalie's legs, peeking out with curious eyes. "This is Sophie." Natalie's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I know this isn't what you expected. My babysitter canceled, and I couldn't find anyone else, and I understand if you want to leave." "Why would I leave?" Maddox straightened up and gestured to the chairs. "Please sit down. Both of you." Natalie didn't move. She seemed frozen, unable to process what was happening. "I have a son," Maddox said. "Jaden, he's 6. So I know what it's like to show up somewhere and have people look at you differently because you're not alone." He smiled at Sophie. "I also know that the best conversations happen when kids are around. They keep things honest." Something shifted in Natalie's expression. The fear didn't disappear entirely, but it made room for something else. Cautious hope, maybe, or disbelief. They sat down. Sophie stayed pressed against Natalie's side at first, but Maddox was patient. He asked Sophie about her bunny, learned that its name was Snowball, and listened seriously when she explained that Snowball was afraid of loud noises but very brave at bedtime. "My son has a stuffed elephant," Maddox offered. "He says it protects him from monsters." Sophie's eyes widened. "There are monsters, not real ones, just the kind that hide in closets and under beds, but elephants are very good at scaring them away." For the first time, Sophie smiled. As the afternoon wore on, Natalie felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Conversation that flowed naturally, laughter that didn't feel forced. A man who looked at her daughter not as a burden or an inconvenience, but as a person worth knowing. Maddox told her about Jaden, about raising him alone, about the looks he got when he took his son to the park. "People see a black man with a kid and they make assumptions," he said. "I've had women ask where his mother is, like I must have done something wrong for her not to be there. I've had security guards follow me through stores because apparently a father buying diapers is suspicious." Natalie felt her throat tighten. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's just reality. But it makes you appreciate the people who see you as a person first. He looked at her directly. I imagine you know something about that. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. By the time they finished their coffee, Sophie had drawn 3 pictures for Maddox, a bunny, an elephant, and something she called a happy family, with 4 stick figures holding hands. Maddox accepted each one with genuine delight, carefully tucking them into his jacket pocket. I'd like to see you again, he said as they walked toward the parking lot. Maybe next time Jaden can come too. I think he and Sophie would get along. Natalie's heart lifted and sank at the same time. I'd like that. She watched him drive away, then buckled Sophie into her car seat. Her daughter was already half asleep, exhausted from the excitement of the day. As Natalie drove home, her sister's face floated through her mind. The promise she had made, the secret she was still keeping. Maddox had been kind, understanding, everything she had hoped for and more. But he didn't know the whole truth, and with every passing moment, telling him grew harder. Their second date happened at Riverside Park on a Saturday afternoon, and this time Maddox brought Jaden. Natalie spotted them first, a tall man in a casual blue shirt holding the hand of a boy who kept tugging him toward the playground. Jaden had his father's warm brown skin and his mother's energy bouncing on his heels like he couldn't contain his excitement. Sophie gripped Natalie's hand tighter. Mommy, is that the man from the coffee shop? Yes, baby, and that's his son Jaden. Remember I told you about him? Sophie nodded but didn't let go. The introductions were awkward at first. Jaden studied Sophie with the unfiltered curiosity of a 6-year-old, while Sophie hid behind Natalie's legs, clutching Snowball to her chest. She's little, Jaden announced. Maddox gave him a gentle look. She's 4. You were 4 once, too. I don't remember being 4. Trust me, you were. And you were scared of everything back then. Dogs, loud noises, the neighbor's cat. Jaden crossed his arms. I was never scared of cats. Natalie knelt down to Sophie's level. Why don't you show Jaden your bunny? Maybe he'd like to meet Snowball. It took a few minutes, but eventually Sophie held out the stuffed animal. Jaden examined it seriously, then reached into his backpack and pulled out a gray elephant with worn velvet ears. This is Stomper, he said. He's really old. My mom gave him to me when I was a baby. Something flickered across Maddox's face, a shadow of grief that passed quickly but didn't quite disappear. Sophie touched Stomper's trunk with one careful finger. He's soft. Yeah, he protects me from monsters. Snowball does that too. And just like that, the ice was broken. Within 20 minutes, both children were racing across the playground, their stuffed animals abandoned on a bench while they climbed and slid and chased each other through the equipment. Natalie and Maddox sat on that bench watching them play. He talks about his mom sometimes, Maddox said, his eyes following Jaden. Less than he used to, but it still happens. He asked me last month if she could see him from heaven. I didn't know what to say. Natalie's throat tightened. What did you tell him? That I believe she can, that she's proud of him every day. He looked down at his hands. I don't know if that's true, but it's what he needed to hear. A shriek from the playground made them both look up. Sophie had fallen from the lowest rung of the monkey bars, and before Natalie could even stand, Jaden was already there. He knelt beside her, his small face serious and concerned. Are you okay? Let me see. Sophie's lip trembled, but she held out her scraped palm. Jaden examined it like a tiny doctor, then looked up at Maddox. Dad, she needs a Band-Aid. Maddox was already reaching into his backpack. I've got one right here. They watched as Jaden carefully applied the bandage to Sophie's hand, his tongue poking out in concentration. When he finished, he patted her arm gently. There, all better. Stomper got hurt once too, but I fixed him. Sophie sniffled and smiled. Thank you. Natalie felt something crack open in her chest. She had spent 2 years trying to give Sophie everything stability, love, a sense of belonging. But watching this boy treat her daughter with such natural kindness, she realized how much they had both been missing. Over the next several weeks, the four of them became inseparable. Dinners at Maddox's house, where Jaden insisted on sitting next to Sophie and cutting her food into smaller pieces. Movie nights with animated films that made the children laugh and the adults pretend not to cry. Cooking sessions that ended with more flour on the floor than in the bowl. Maddox stepped into his role with Sophie as easily as breathing. He read her bedtime stories when she stayed over, doing different voices for each character until she giggled herself to sleep. He learned that she liked her sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares, and that she was afraid of thunderstorms, but pretended not to be. Natalie watched him with her daughter, and her heart swelled and ached in equal measure. This was everything she had wanted, everything Rachel had asked her to find. But every night when she was alone, the guilt crept back in. Maddox didn't know. He thought Sophie was her biological daughter, and she had never corrected him. At first, the omission seemed small, irrelevant even. What did it matter how Sophie came into her life? She was Natalie's daughter now in every way that counted. But as the weeks passed and their relationship deepened, the secret grew heavier. She found herself flinching whenever someone commented on how Sophie didn't look like her. She changed the subject when Maddox asked about Sophie's father. She deflected questions about baby photos with vague excuses about a lost phone or a flooded storage unit. One evening, Natalie sat alone in her apartment after putting Sophie to bed. She pulled out the box she kept hidden in her closet, the one filled with Rachel's things. Photos from their childhood, a pressed flower from Rachel's wedding, the hospital bracelet Sophie had worn as a newborn, and there at the bottom, a letter Rachel had written during her final weeks. Natalie unfolded it carefully, letting her sister's handwriting blur through her tears. "My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, then I'm already gone. I need you to know that I'm not afraid. I'm only sad that I won't get to see Sophie grow up. But I know you will be there for all of it because that's who you are. You've always been the strong one, even when you didn't believe it. Be her mother, Natalie. Not her aunt, not her guardian, her mother. Don't let her grow up feeling like she's missing something. And when you find someone who loves you both, let him in. You deserve a real family, too. I love you. I love her. Take care of each other. Rachel." Natalie pressed the letter to her chest and sobbed. She picked up her phone and started typing a message to Maddox. "There's something I need to tell you about Sophie, about where she really came from." Her thumb hovered over the send button. Then she deleted the whole thing. The following Sunday, Maddox invited Natalie to meet his mother. Eleanor Williams lived in a neat brick house on the other side of town, with a garden full of roses and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a warm smile that didn't quite reach them when she looked at Natalie. Throughout dinner, Eleanor asked questions that felt casual, but landed like tiny arrows. "Sophie is such a beautiful girl. She has such interesting features. Does she take after her father?" Natalie felt her stomach clench. "She has my sister's eyes, actually." "Your sister?" Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "I didn't know you had a sister." "I did. She passed away a few years ago." "I'm so sorry to hear that." Eleanor's voice softened, but her gaze remained probing. "It must have been difficult raising a child alone after losing someone so close to you." Natalie nodded, not trusting herself to say more. After dinner, while Natalie helped Sophie wash up in the bathroom, she heard voices from the kitchen. Eleanor and Maddox speaking in low tones. "I'm not saying she's a bad person, Maddox. I'm just saying something doesn't add up. That child doesn't look like her at all, and she gets nervous every time I ask about the father. Mom, plenty of kids don't look like their parents. And plenty of people have secrets they don't want anyone to know. I just want you to be careful. You and Jaden have been through enough." Natalie's hands trembled as she dried Sophie's face. She should tell him tonight, before his mother's suspicions poisoned everything. But when they said goodbye on the porch, Maddox kissed her softly and smiled, and the words died in her throat. The distance started slowly, a text message that went unanswered for hours. A dinner invitation declined because of work. Maddox still smiled when he saw her still held her hand, still played with Sophie. But something had shifted. A wall had gone up invisible, but present. Then came the night that nearly broke Natalie apart. They were at Maddox's house for a family dinner, the four of them gathered around the kitchen table eating spaghetti and laughing at Jaden's attempts to slurp his noodles without making a mess. Jaden looked at Natalie with sauce smeared across his chin. "Mama Natalie, can you help me?" The word hit Natalie like a physical blow. Mama. He had called her Mama. Maddox's eyes widened. Natalie felt tears spring to her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. "Of course, sweetheart." Her voice came out thick and unsteady. Sophie watched the exchange with curious eyes. Then in the silence that followed, she asked a question that made Natalie's blood run cold. "Mommy, how come I don't have any baby pictures like Jaden?" The room went still. Maddox looked at Natalie, waiting. We lost a lot of photos when we moved, remember?" Natalie kept her voice light, but her hands were shaking under the table. "The storage unit flooded." Sophie frowned. "But Jaden has pictures from when he was born, with his mommy." "Different families keep different things, baby." Sophie accepted this explanation and went back to her food, but Maddox didn't look away. His expression wasn't accusatory, just quietly searching. After the children went to bed, he found Natalie in the kitchen, washing dishes she had already washed twice. "You okay?" She nodded without turning around. "Natalie." His hand touched her shoulder. "If there's something you want to tell me, I'm listening." She turned to face him, and for a moment the truth sat right there on her tongue. But his eyes were so kind, so trusting, and she couldn't bear to watch that trust shatter. "I'm fine," she said. "Just tired." He didn't push, but she saw the doubt flicker across his face before he kissed her goodnight. 3 days later, Eleanor called her son. "I did some checking," she said. "A friend of mine works at the county records office. That little girl, Sophie, she was adopted. Natalie isn't her biological mother." Maddox sat in his car outside his house, the phone pressed to his ear, feeling like the ground had opened beneath him. "How do you know this?" "Public records, baby. Adoptions aren't always sealed anymore, especially when the biological parent is deceased." Deceased. So there was more to the story, more that Natalie hadn't told him. "Why didn't she tell me?" The question came out as a whisper. "I don't know." "But you need to find out." Maddox ended the call and stared at the steering wheel for a long time. He thought about confronting Natalie, immediately demanding answers. But something held him back. He wanted her to trust him enough to tell him herself. He wanted to believe there was a reason she had kept this secret. So he waited. And the waiting was agony. Natalie felt him pulling away and didn't understand why. She reached for his hand and he held it, but absently. She tried to make him laugh, but his smiles didn't quite reach his eyes. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She asked him to meet her at the coffee shop where they had first met. The same table by the window. No children this time. When he arrived, his face was guarded in a way she had never seen before. "Thank you for coming," she started. "Of course." She took a breath, then another. Her hands were trembling so badly she pressed them flat against the table. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." Maddox waited. "Sophie isn't my biological daughter." The words came out in a rush. "She's my niece. My sister Rachel's child. Rachel died of cancer 2 years ago, and I adopted Sophie when she was 2. I've been raising her ever since." She watched his face, searching for a reaction. He remained still, his expression unreadable. "I didn't tell you because I was scared. Every relationship I've ever had ended the moment people found out the truth. They looked at me differently, Like I was pretending to be something I wasn't. Like I wasn't really her mother. Her voice cracked. But I am her mother. In every way that matters, I am. Rachel asked me to be her mother. She made me promise before she died that I would give Sophie a family. A real family. And I've been trying so hard to keep that promise. Tears streamed down her face. I should have told you from the beginning. I know that now. But I was so afraid of losing you, of losing everything we were building. Maddox was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. Why didn't you trust me? The question cut deeper than anger would have. I don't know, Natalie whispered. I was so used to being judged, so used to people leaving. I thought if I just waited long enough, if I let you see how much I love her, the truth wouldn't matter. The truth always matters. He stood up slowly, his movements heavy. I need time, Natalie. I need to think. Maddox, please. I'm not saying it's over. He met her eyes, and she saw pain there that mirrored her own. I'm saying I need time to process this, to figure out what it means. He walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Natalie sat at that table by the window alone, crying into her cold coffee. She thought about Sophie asleep at home with the babysitter, about Jaden calling her mama, about Rachel's letter and the promise she had tried so hard to keep. She picked up her phone and sent one message to Maddox. I understand. I'll wait. No response came. 3 days passed without a word from Maddox. Natalie went through the motions of her daily life, making breakfast for Sophie, going to work, coming home reading bedtime stories. But everything felt muted, like she was watching herself from a great distance. Sophie noticed. Children always notice. Mommy, when are we going to see Jaden again? Natalie smoothed her daughter's hair back from her forehead. Soon, baby. I hope soon. Is the man with the kind eyes still our friend? The question pierced through Natalie's carefully maintained composure. She pulled Sophie close and held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Yes, sweetheart. He's still our friend. She hoped she wasn't lying. Across town, Maddox sat in Jaden's room after his son had fallen asleep. The nightlight cast soft shadows across the walls, illuminating the drawings Jaden had taped everywhere. Dinosaurs and superheroes, and more recently, a new edition 4 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Too tall, too small. A family. Maddox pulled his phone from his pocket and looked at Natalie's message for the 100th time. I understand. I'll wait. He wanted to respond. A dozen times he had started typing only to delete everything. What could he say? That he felt betrayed. That he understood both were true. Neither felt adequate. He wandered into the living room and found himself standing in front of the shelf where he kept Sarah's photos. There she was, smiling at their wedding, holding newborn Jaden in the hospital, dancing in the kitchen on a random Tuesday night, flour on her cheek from the cookies they were baking, and there tucked behind the larger frames was the photo he rarely looked at. Sarah in a hospital gown, thin and pale 3 weeks before the accident. Maddox remembered finding those medical papers after her death. The diagnosis she had never shared with him. She had been scheduled to start chemotherapy the week after the accident. She had carried that secret alone, never giving him the chance to support her, to fight alongside her, to tell her everything would be okay. For months he had been angry, furious that she had kept something so important from him. But time had softened that anger into something more like understanding. Sarah hadn't hidden her diagnosis to hurt him. She had hidden it because she was scared. Because she didn't know how to find the right words. Because she thought she had more time. Just like Natalie. Maddox sank onto the couch and closed his eyes. Natalie hadn't lied to hurt him. She had lied because life had taught her that the truth meant rejection, that honesty was a luxury reserved for people who had never been abandoned. The doorbell rang. Maddox glanced at the clock. Nearly 10 at night. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, his mother stood on the porch wrapped in her favorite cardigan against the evening chill. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside without a word. Eleanor settled onto the couch and looked at her son with eyes that saw more than he wanted to show. "You haven't called that girl back? How do you know?" "Because you have the same look you had after Sarah died. Like you're trying to figure out how to live in a world that doesn't make sense anymore." Maddox sat down across from her. "She lied to me, Mom, for weeks, about something important. She adopted her dying sister's child and raised her as her own." Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. "She didn't abandon that baby. She didn't give her to strangers. She stepped up when she didn't have to, and she's been that little girl's mother in every way that counts." "I know that. Then what's really bothering you?" Maddox was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "She didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. She looked at me and saw another person who would leave." Eleanor reached over and took his hand. "Maddox, baby, think about what that girl has been through. She lost her sister. She became a mother overnight. She's been judged and abandoned by people who should have supported her." She squeezed his fingers. "Can you really blame her for being afraid? Haven't you been afraid too?" The words landed somewhere deep in his chest. "Sarah kept secrets too," Maddox said quietly. "She was scared. She thought she was protecting me, and I was so angry at her for so long, but eventually I realized she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was just human." Eleanor nodded slowly. "So the question isn't whether Natalie made a mistake. The question is whether you can forgive her for being human." Maddox looked at the drawings Jaden had made, the 4 stick figures under the yellow sun. "Jaden called her Mama," he said. "The other night at dinner. He just said it like it was the most natural thing in the world." "And how did that make you feel?" "Like maybe I wasn't the only one who wanted this to work." Eleanor stood up and kissed his forehead the way she used to when he was a child. "Don't let fear make this decision for you, baby. You've already lost one woman you loved. Don't lose another one because you're too proud to forgive." She left without saying anything else. But her words stayed with him through the night. The next morning, Maddox drove to Natalie's apartment. He didn't call ahead. He wasn't sure what he would say, only that he needed to see her. When Natalie opened the door, her eyes were red and swollen. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Behind her, Sophie's voice drifted from the kitchen. "Mommy, who is it?" Natalie's gaze searched Maddox's face, looking for anger, for rejection. He saw the way she braced herself the same way she had braced herself that first day at the coffee shop. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded and stepped aside. They sat on her small couch, close but not touching. Natalie's hands were clasped in her lap, her knuckles white. "I'm sorry I needed so much time," Maddox began. "I was hurt. Not because you adopted Sophie, I don't care about that. I was hurt because you didn't trust me enough to tell me." "I know." Natalie's voice cracked. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I should have told you from the beginning. I was just so scared." "I understand that now." He took a deep breath. "Sarah kept a secret from me too. She was sick before the accident, and she never told me. I was angry for a long time, but eventually I realized she wasn't trying to deceive me. She was scared. She didn't know how to say the words. She thought she was protecting me." Natalie looked up at him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't want to repeat my mistakes," Maddox continued. "I spent so much time being angry that I forgot to be grateful for the time we had. I'm not going to do that again." He reached out and took her hands. "Natalie, you didn't give birth to Sophie, but you chose to be her mother. You chose to love her when you didn't have to. That's not a weakness. That's the strongest kind of love there is." A sob escaped Natalie's throat. "You don't think I'm a fraud? I think you're exactly what she needs. And I think you're exactly what Jaden and I need too." He pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. 1 year later, they stood in Maddox's backyard, surrounded by friends and family. A photographer arranged them under the old oak tree, Maddox and Natalie in the center, Jaden and Sophie on either side. Jaden had his arm around Sophie's shoulders. She was clutching Snowball in one hand and Stomper in the other, because the stuffed animals were family too now. "Everyone say cheese," the photographer called. Sophie grinned. "Cheese?" Jaden rolled his eyes. "That's so babyish." "You're babyish," Sophie shot back. Natalie laughed, and Maddox caught her hand, squeezing gently. On her finger, a simple diamond ring caught the afternoon light. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep in Jaden's room, Natalie stood in the hallway looking at the photo wall. Maddox had added new pictures alongside the old ones, Sophie at the park, the four of them at the beach, Natalie teaching Jaden to make paper airplanes. And there beside the wedding photo of Maddox and Sarah was a small framed picture Natalie had never seen before. Rachel holding newborn Sophie in the hospital, exhausted but radiant with joy. Natalie touched the frame, tears blurring her vision. Maddox came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "I found it in that box you keep in your closet," he said. "I thought she should be here too, part of the family." Natalie turned and buried her face against his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "She gave you Sophie," Maddox said, "and Sophie H. brought you to us. Rachel will always be part of our story." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, surrounded by photos of the people they had loved and lost and found. Two people who had been broken by life. Two children who needed a family. One choice that brought them all together. Family, Natalie realized, had never been about blood. It was about showing up. It was about choosing each other again and again, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard.